All right, and welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast, Week 5 Reaction Edition. Tonight, we break down the fallout from another weekend of NFL football from a fantasy perspective. My name is Seth Woolcock. I'm your host this evening. Once again, we are blessed to be joined by Dr. Deepak Chona, who will be covering all of the injuries from today. He's an orthopedic sports surgeon, joining us from what looks like a pretty spiffy looking penthouse. Another busy day for you, Doc. How are you doing tonight, man?
I'm good. Vandy won yesterday and today Texans, so I'm on cloud 9.
Let's go. What a weekend for you. This will probably be the only time that ever happens to you in your entire life, Deepak. So cherish this, soak it in, my friend.
Yes, sir.
We're also joined by a guy who should be in all his glory right now, as well as playoff baseball is underway as NFL football continues to roll along as well. He's Chris Welsh, aka The Welsh. What's going on, man?
Oh, could be anywhere else but here after my 49er. I am decimated. We were talking about this off air. Great day. Great fantasy day.
Yeah.
Great take day. Get to do a whole bunch of I told you so's. Great gambling day. 49ers, embarrassing. But you two are lifting my spirits. Happy to be here. Happy to break this all down. I'm going to, woosha. What was it from Bad Boys? We're going to get it out of our system.
Yes.
We're going to do good. Seth, lead us to the promised land, my friend.
Absolutely great to be here with both of you gentlemen as well. The outline for today's program, we will hit on the injuries with Dr. Deepak Chona. Then we'll unveil a new segment, Scott's second half sprouts, and then we'll get into our game recaps, talk about the winners, the losers, some early waiver wire reactions, everything in between. You guys know it. Thanks for tuning in, by the way, as well, whether that's here on YouTube or the audio version of this program as well. Either way, we greatly appreciate it. The easiest way to support us here, though, is subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, or subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Also, give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy this type of content. Let's go ahead, boys. Let's jump into the injuries here. Not as bad as a week as we had probably last week, but early in this New England-Miami game, we had Achane rolled out with a concussion. What does this mean, Deepak, to you for his availability next week against the Colts?
Yeah, so the nice thing about this is that the timing on him having the bye this coming week actually makes him very likely to be available the following week, as you said. So the average on these is about 1 week. Most players would clear by 2. So I'm actually looking to buy low on Achane if somebody's not paying attention.
Okay. Well, the Dolphins kind of looked like they found something offensively for the first time in a while in the second half of that game. A lot of Jalen Wright, a lot of Raheem Mostert. If you roster Achane based on what Deepak said, are you spending any fab to get Wright? He's only rostered in about 8% of leagues right now.
Yeah, I don't think it hurts. We saw more Raheem Mostert end up having 19 carries. Jalen Wright kind of play. What they ended up doing, like Achane has taken the dominance. They said before the game started that Raheem Mostert was actually going to be used in kind of a reduced role because of how they see Achane. Achane gets hurt, and then all of a sudden Mostert got thrust into 19 plus carries, and Jalen ended up playing a pseudo old school Achane role where he ended up, getting enough carries, and he would be someone. I mean, obviously if Mostert was out there, that would be the play, but I'm kind of with Deepak. I don't think it hurts to go and pick up Jalen Wright. You're seeing some efficiency there, but it's going to go to Mostert second. And if you can go buy on Achane right now, me and Erickson have been preaching buy on the Dolphins. You saw Huntley look a little bit better in this one. Achane, go buy on a bye week while people are freaking out. And if Wright or Mostert are out there, definitely doesn't hurt to throw like a buck. It'd be one of those sneaky waiver wires you can get through on a week when no one's going to be paying for a bye week guy.
Yeah. All right. Love it. Love to hear it, guys. Nico Collins here. He exits Sunday with a hamstring injury after a 67-yard touchdown reception. He looked great early in that game. Will we not see the Texans leading wide receiver until week 7 or 8, you think, here, Deepak?
Yeah, I think there's actually a pretty decent chance that he does come back this coming week. When you look at the video, it's relatively mild. It is a re-aggravation, and that does kind of increase the risk of him missing time. But the comments so far are very optimistic, and it sounded like they held him as a precaution rather than making this worse. So if that's the case, then practice reports will tell us the story, and I would lean a little bit towards him coming back next week.
Okay. If we don't happen to see Nico out there next week, would that change your ranking at all, Welsh, of Tank Dell, of Stephon Diggs? We did see Dell, of course, run more snaps, therefore run more routes in this game as well without Nico out there. Where do you think that would put them in your ranks if there were no Collins next week?
Yeah, 100%. One of the things we did see, we saw Xavier Hutchinson end up getting like a decent amount of those snaps because they like to run these 3 wide receiver sets. But what we've seen, I've kind of been a little bit down on Diggs for the majority of the season, even though he's decent, but he's the lower ADOT guy. So he's the guy they're going to, kind of keep into those lower spots in general. And what I'm getting at is that's Tank Dell. Tank Dell, they'll move into the slot, they'll move out. He's going to be the big play through the middle. He will play that big Nico type role. So I will move probably Tank up the most. I think, you also saw Diggs' target share go up a tiny bit in this game. I think Diggs really falls into a comfortable wide receiver 2, and Tank would be floating into that mid wide receiver. I would have Tank probably over Diggs if Nico were to miss time, but luckily it doesn't look like he's probably going to.
Yeah, that's great news. That's really good to hear because I don't think anyone was really excited to pick up Xavier Hutchinson for a spot start there. So yeah, good news there from Dr. Deepak Chona. We appreciate that. Aaron Jones over in London, meanwhile, was off to a very hot start in the first quarter of this game. However, he did limp off with what's determined to be a hip injury here. What does this mean for the 29-year-old running back, Deepak? He's been great so far this season, but was banged up most of last year. So, panic's starting to set in, I feel like, pretty early out there on the internet for Aaron Jones managers.
Yeah, and he's had there's some speculation this may be related to a hamstring injury, which he's had before as well.
Oh, wow.
The average, the way he was limping suggests a kind of a moderate severity here, and the average for that would be about 2 weeks. So with their bye also kind of coming at a lucky time, we may not actually see him miss more than about a week, but the data would definitely favor him being out this coming week if they had a game.
Okay. And based on that, Welsh, are you spending up on Ty Chandler at all just for having to sit him on your bench with the Vikings coming up on a bye here in week 6 after London?
Probably not. I mean, again, there's a balance of how much fab you have to spend to maybe sneaking in. Ty Chandler might be worth it, especially early on. I would say this: if we get more detrimental news to what this injury could be, I might be a little bit more aggressive. We have seen Chandler more involved in the passing game. That now that I say it, I was a little dismissive right when you said maybe I do sneak in, just like we talked about a little bit earlier. Maybe do sneak in a buck or two, try to get Ty Chandler when people are making more desperate moves to move off of that because his shares are going up a tiny bit. You're seeing what is the one worry we've had with Aaron Jones? It's the injury stuff. It's like what injuries as he gets a little bit older. So yeah, Chandler is somebody that might worth sliding if you are not dealing with a bye week issue yourself.
Yeah. Hopefully, fingers crossed out there that your lineups are looking good here for week 6. Maybe you can sneak in a $1, $2, maybe even a $0 fab bid for Chandler there. He won't be projected anything here in week 6, so might have a little bit of a discount there on the talented running back there for the Minnesota Vikings. Meanwhile, Xavier Legette also banged up in this one with a shoulder injury. Initially not ruled out, just ruled questionable, but never did come back in this one. The Panthers were kind of out of it, so maybe that's why we did not see the first round rookie back out there. Deepak, what's your initial diagnosis on this one?
Yeah, it did sound from the comments that the game script did play a role. So with that being said, it does sound like Xavier Legette himself expects to play next week. So until proven otherwise, that's the way we lean on this.
Is there any type of re-injury risk for this type of shoulder injury, you think?
We don't have a ton of info on really what the sort of underlying diagnosis is here. I would say based on the timeline, if he truly does return to practice Wednesday or Thursday, which is what it sounds like he's trending towards, then we know it's a mild severity injury, and I wouldn't really put a shoulder at a high risk in that case.
Okay. With or without Legette, how are you feeling about Deontay Johnson after this week? Well, a lot of praise was being sung his way after the last 2 weeks here. Good performances, pretty disappointing day overall for Carolina pass catchers, especially Deontay Johnson, wide receiver 1 in this offense.
Love it. Go buy him. Go. This is a week to buy him. Yeah, I would also say this about Legette. I think Legette's really sneaky if due to this injury, people move off of it, because what have we heard all week with these rumors? Oh, the Panthers, if they start going down a wrong area, they're going to trade Deontay. They're already there. And Deontay clearly is going to be a player that they're going to move off of. So I like the idea of if Deontay stays, we're going to get, what are they going to do? They're going to get right back to it. They had a bad outing, Dalton bad outing. They're going to get right back to 10 targets to Deontay. If he goes and gets traded, great. He can most likely going to go to a higher powered offense, and I think that's even better. And then if you are going to take him off of this, Legette is a player that's going to get to move in on the back half of the year to be a guy. So I like Legette in any cheap way that you can go acquire. Again, in your ability to be able to kind of maintain and hold bench stuff. I know this is a weird time where people can't do that. Yes, right. But this to me is a quintessential, like, great, Deontay had a really poor game. Everyone's going to be mad. Go and see if you can buy him on the cheap. Because one thing we do know is he's a ball hawk. And as long as they give him the targets, didn't happen this game, it's going to happen in every other game. I would go and buy cheap on Deontay if, that's out there for you.
Okay. Meanwhile, Rashee Rice is going to be having exploratory surgery this week, Deepak. Rap Sheet told us this weekend that, wow, he is going on IR, and we don't know the severity of the knee injury currently, that hopefully this surgery will give us better answers. Is this a good or a bad thing in your mind that we haven't had a clear diagnosis up to this point? And what do you expect that we will learn from this procedure?
Yeah, it's a really interesting course the way this has gone. So I suspect what's happening is that the partial ACL is the tricky part of this injury. So some of these partial ACLs are stable enough to keep playing on without needing a reconstruction surgery.
Oh, wow.
And then some are not. So I think in trying to figure out which injury his falls into, they want to get him asleep, do a full exam of that ACL. Now, my suspicion is based on the fact that they were initially concerned and also looking just at the energy of the video. I would think they find that this is probably not stable and does need a surgical reconstruction, which would put him out the average about 10 months or so from that surgery. But we'll find out for sure pretty soon here.
Welsh, are you keeping Rashee Rice on your fantasy squad right now just in case there is the chance that maybe this isn't a complete tear? He can get back out there. And are there any other Chiefs wide receivers you're also keeping your eye on outside of Xavier Worthy right now?
Yeah, unless I'm forced to have to get rid of him because I don't have IR spots or whatever, then I'm probably not thinking about dropping him yet. If I were in a league that maybe it was like super, super limited, probably more like a 10-man league, and there were like good, fun, viable wide receivers out there, I agree. And I followed Deepak all week. And Deepak, I saw you post like, listen, this is not good. And this is what this is spelling. the end of the day, this looks bad. Plus, you throw on top of it this kind of messy situation where you heard like his management team and all lawyers and everything are looking into possibly trying to move that court date back up so he can serve that suspension this year, probably assuming that this knee injury is going to keep him out a while.
Yeah.
Sure. Hold on. If you can, if you can't, I really don't think it's detrimental at this point if there are good options. And then it's kind of, we have to wait and see with the Chiefs. I think Justin Watson is a super deep league guy that is going to get 3 or 4 or 5, maybe, 6 targets. Like he can jump into that role. But now without Rashee Rice, that's not going to be that first read guy. It's going to go back to Kelsey, a little bit of Noah Gray. Xavier Worthy's the clear cut guy we're all staring at. I just don't know if he will be implemented with the targets that Rashee Rice got, and maybe he only sees 1 or 2 more. So unless you can just get Xavier Worthy, I'm not really speculating anywhere else. And then we're going to have to see what this team looks like. And maybe they do try to get involved in the trade market in the coming weeks. But Justin Watson, Noah Gray, those are probably your best 2 options in deep leagues if you're trying to get into that Chiefs offense.
Any interest in Juju Smith-Schuster? I know I came on here last week and I kind of dismissed his name very quickly. However, he did kind of run this role that Rashee Rice had last year back in 2022 when the Chiefs did go to the Super Bowl. Wasn't, a great overall fantasy producer that season, but was a wide receiver 3 that year. So any interest in Juju? Because I think he's still unrostered in a majority of leagues as well.
Picking up Juju is like, I know everyone's killing the new Joker movie, but it's like the original Joker where you're just like, it's like that's fine. Yeah. I can't do it. I can't stomach putting him in my lineup, but you're not wrong. Like they're going to put him in the slot. He will get maybe a few targets. There could be something there. And if it's super deep and you're desperate, sure. But my overarching would be no.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Okay. I'm a Steelers fan, so I still remember the good time, the 1,400 yards back in the day. So a little bit of hope for me. But overall, Deepak, we can't thank you enough for not only joining us this week on the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast, but every single week for our reaction live stream. How can we best support you throughout the remainder of the season, my man?
Just keep on coming with the support. I'm on Twitter at SportMD Analysis and Instagram at Sportsman Analytics, and we'll keep it rolling every way we can.
Awesome. We appreciate it, man. Have a great rest of your night. And guys, stick around here for the game recaps.
The fantasy season is like running a marathon. Checking your lineup, tracking injury news, making trades, Monday night waivers. You've got to show up day in and day out for 17 weeks. So how do you dominate your league without it feeling like a second job? The answer is My Playbook. Syncing your league with My Playbook is totally free, and it makes winning your league easy. You'll get a personal dashboard that has everything you need to know all in one place. News and notes for your players, bye-week alerts, matchup info, it's all there. Our League Analyzer gives you power rankings for your league and shows you how the experts rate your team. We even have an AI model that studies injuries and tells you which of your players are going to play this week. And for premium users, there's every possible advantage you can think of. Set the lineup the experts would start with just a single click. Get instant waiver suggestions and trade suggestions anytime. You can even put your lineup on autopilot and have us set it for you. So this season, take your time back and dominate your league like never before. Start for free today with the My Playbook app or at fantasypros.com/myplaybook.
All right, folks, it is time for our Scott second half sprout segment where we highlight one young player who we'll call a seed who is ready to sprout and break out and help your fantasy team dominate down the stretch. Welsh, who is this week's Scott second half sprout?
Well, here on Fantasy Pros, if you were listening on the Tuesday, Wednesday buy-sell trade show, I planted that first seed. This is a very me situation because I told everybody, go and buy Tank Bigsby on that show. And this week, our sprout is Tank Bigsby. Bigsby, over 100 yards rushing, 13 carries, chipped in 2 touchdowns. And outside of the great game, he also outsnapped Travis Etienne. That's a big role here. Wow. And listen, one of the things I talked about on that show, this is the main thing, was that not only was he putting up big explosive percentages, it was around a 19% explosive run percentage going into this week. Mm-hmm. He also was top 10 in yards after contact, explosive runs and breaking tackles. It was a good recipe. It worked out this week, and it sprouted to the very tippy top, being one of the top fantasy running backs for the week.
What do you think changed from Bigsby from 2023 to 2024, Welsh? Because I was never a huge fan of the prospect coming out of Auburn there. But it felt like everything last year, whether it was drops or just inefficiency or fumbles, just didn't go his way. And it feels like now everything, the tides are turning in his favor. He's breaking out big plays left and right. They trust him more in pass blocking as well. What do you think the biggest change was from year 1 to year 2 for Bigsby?
Yeah, I think it's opportunity. I think it's understanding the offense. Everything you're kind of like, it's just growth. It's overall growth. Like everybody was a year. I was very anti-Tank Bigsby last year. Just want to point out, I was very like, that's dumb. It's all Travis Etienne. But those people were just a year too early on the Tank Bigsby side. Etienne has kind of stepped back. He's had some critically bad fumbles. And like I said, what it is for Bigsby and what it is for any singular player like this is dominating your opportunities. And he has been one of the most efficient at taking charge of his opportunities, even though they've been shorter. 13 carries for over 102 scores. That's the thing that does get you to outsnap. Breaking those tackles while making big explosive plays. Those are the things that will keep you out there more and more. Etienne moved to more of a receiving role this week. I think he had like 6 catches. So he was on that. They really like Tank. I think this is going to move Tank moving forward to be a guy on the ground. This could end up being an AFC Rachaad White, Bucky Irving situation where Tank takes a majority of the on the ground stuff and Etienne is going to be their third down and their pass back. Just look out for it, but hopefully you got in on it early.
And just like your fantasy teams, your lawn needs the right care to thrive, especially during fall. I bet you didn't know, though, that fall is actually the perfect time to feed your lawn, give your lawn a boost with Scott's Turf Builder Winter Care, recover from summer, prep for winter, and lay the foundation for a strong, healthy lawn come spring. Scott's Winter Guard strengthens your grass roots, repairs summer damage, and prepares your lawn for winter, so you know you can enjoy fall without worrying about your yard. So don't wait. Pick up Scott's Turf Builder Winter Guard today. Feed your lawn. Feed it. All right. And speaking of feeding, after trailing early, the Jets fed Garrett Wilson in this game in their 17-23 loss to the Vikings. 29.1 PPR points for Garrett Wilson, 22 targets, 13 receptions for the young man, 101 yards and 1 touchdown. Serviceable game from these other Jets pass catching options as well. Welsh here, Tyler Conklin, 9 targets for him. Allen Lazard, double-digit targets for him once again as well. Are these now like startable fantasy options, you think, in Conklin and Lazard? And what are your thoughts on Garrett Wilson kind of taking this volume hog role this week?
Yeah, well, this was a Garrett Wilson. It's funny, someone in the chat just said trade Garrett Wilson now. I was kind of I think it was the time to buy Garrett Wilson, and he was highlighted on our BP show. He was my favorite prop of the week. 54.5 was his receiving yard prop, and obviously he was able to smash that. An absurd 22 targets. But this was the defensive matchup that really worked. The Vikings going into this were giving up the most receiving yards to wide receivers in the NFL. So you're able to pass on them. Aaron Rodgers complained, we got to get going with this. So that's exactly what they were able to do. They were able to sling the ball a bit. So to your question, I actually am obviously you can't go buy Garrett Wilson now. You had to do it last week. I'm kind of a hold on Garrett Wilson. He's not going to get 22 targets every week, but I think this is 10 plus. That's how they win games. They have to be more efficient on the ground. So this actually, and I think Debro is in our chat saying, buy Breece Hall. I think that's not a bad thing either, because it's been very Braylon Allen, Breece Hall trending down a little bit. I just don't think we're done there. They've got to find their balance. To your question, though, are Conklin and Lazard options? They're deeper league by week. You got a wide receiver and a flex that's off. I could put Lazard in a lineup, especially full PPR. He's going to get some red zone targets. Rodgers likes to get to him, especially passing matchups. Conklin, maybe. Tight ends are kind of leveling out a little bit right now, where I don't feel like we have as much chaos. But the Garrett Wilson breakdown, I am buying into the Garrett Wilson side of this. And I think that's the most important thing. But I will say that on the running back side, running backs were held to just 35 yards on both of it. So, I mean, the Vikings were able to stop the run. The Jets completely went away from it. And that really does hurt Breece Hall. A really interesting top end of running backs, by the way. Bijan kind of down, Breece Hall, obviously McCaffrey, like that top end of RBs that we were all trying to sell. These are the only ones that you can trust. It's Saquon and, Derrick Henry in the second round.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're not really panicking on Breece Hall, because I know there's probably a ton of managers who are panicking after just 10.5 combined fantasy points the past 2 weeks. I personally am not as well. Like we even saw this last year, if you remember, right before the fantasy playoffs, Brees had a down game or two where he had 2 or 3 points and then he exploded for a couple 30 burgers, a couple 40 burgers in the fantasy postseason. So like I'm not panicked at all. And it doesn't sound like you are either with Brees here.
Yeah, it's not that I wouldn't like, it's not great. Like I don't like to see 18 carries for like 24 yards or some nonsense over the last 2 weeks. It's bad. But we know he does like major damage on the receiving side. One thing to look at is, if Devontae Adams does materialize as a Jet long-term, that could affect both of these guys. And that could be the sell Garrett Wilson crowd. But I think Jets as a whole are so down that Garrett Wilson is stabilized. He has not met a value where you could trade. And Breece Hall is so far down. I'm going to tell you what, Breece Hall, this reminds me a bit of the Tyreek Hill fear. And it's not done. Like I've been kind of preaching by Tyreek Hill. It was a good week. It wasn't great by any means.
Yeah.
But it's been so suppressed that the cost is really worth taking the risk. That's, I think, where we're at with Breece Hall, because it's not only 2 bad weeks of performance, it's a running back that has people scared. We've gone from he's a top 5 RB to really far down. If we are starting to talk about being able to move low teens RBs for Breece Hall, I'm definitely going to buy.
Okay. On the other side of the ball here, I don't know whether it was the Jets defense or just traveling overseas, but the Vikings offense wasn't as prolific today as in previous weeks. Just 253 total yards here, 4.3 fantasy points for Sam Darnold. Is this just a weird game, you think, Welsh, or did he actually just turn back into a pumpkin? And are you rostering him through the week 6 bye? I think that's the big question managers need to know.
I'm not sure you need to roster him, especially pending what quarterbacks ended up getting moved in your leagues. I mean, Joe Flacco has been fantastic.
Yeah.
Am I willing to? Sure. Anybody that is like, oh my God, this week off of the Vikings, I will take buying opportunities. I guess that only speaks to like Jefferson, because this is what happens. These like overseas game. Like I think we talked about this earlier in the week here on Pros. It's like, what's your, how do you project overseas games? And it's like, it's going to be weird. It's probably going to play to an under. You're going to have messy offenses because of the travel and stuff like that. Like I expect things to be weird. This was Darnold's work. Darnold has looked like a superstar. And this was his absolutely worst game. 14 of 31, 179, didn't throw a touchdown, had a pick. Like this is a bad off game, but he has really run these offenses well. Addison helps make this team a bit better. So no, I think this is just an anomaly of a week, but we do have to watch what happens with Aaron Jones.
Agreed. Let's move to the home of Skyline Chili for one of the most exciting games of the season. Kind of the opposite of what you expected from an AFC North clash. The Ravens defeat the Bengals 41-38 in overtime. 520 total yards of offense for Baltimore, 442 from Cincinnati as well. Lamar was fantastic, 4 total touchdowns from him, 33 fantasy points on the day. Joe Burrow matched that total as well with 5 touchdowns of his own. Zay Flowers, big game for him, 19 fantasy points. King Henry, big day for him. Mostly kind of saving grace was on that last big run. I walked into the living room. My girlfriend was like, man, I didn't hit my parlay. I said, hey, this game might go to overtime. Don't worry about it. And hey, Derrick Henry, he gets his rushing over because of that. Who are your biggest winners in this absolute shootout in the AFC North?
Well, I mean, if you're looking at the Baltimore side, you love to see Zay Flowers get back to this. They had such a piss poor offensive passing performance last week where no one could get the ball and people were like, oh, did Zay turn into a pumpkin? I think the Zay side is really encouraging. I mean, the quarterback offensive performances of 56 total completions between these two quarterbacks is crazy. But also what I think is really great to focus on that Ravens side is this is who they can be. Like, we see them as this heavy running team. I think Justice Hill outsnapped Derrick Henry in this game, but they both eat on a consistent basis. But these really big offensive performances, Zay Flowers is the Chiefs version of Rashee Rice. Like he's the guy that's going to get the massive amount of targets. So I think Zay Flowers is a winner if anybody got it. Derrick Henry pays off. I do want to point out, I think probably the most important Ravens thing to talk about is the tight ends, because that's where everybody is at. Mark Andrews did finally have a game, 4 catches for 55, but likely ended up scoring 2 touchdowns. And this is important, likely again outsnapped Andrews. And he ran, I believe, 11 more routes than him. So as much as this feels a little warm and cozy about Mark Andrews getting something again, likely was the guy inside the red zone that they were targeting for touchdowns, and he outsnapped and had more routes run. So I think a lot of people are going to be like, hey, are we back with Andrews? Not really. I don't think so. This is still a run-heavy offense. They needed, let me go. What was it? 42 pass attempts for Lamar Jackson for Mark Andrews to be irrelevant. Guess what? He's not going to throw 42 times every single week. It's going to be 42 carries, between the two backs. Yeah. So I'm really not backing on Andrews or anything like that. I like what Likely did. And then, just quickly on the Bengals, since you were talking about it, Burrow, obviously massive week, 30 completions, Jamar out of his mind. We did see Chase Brown out carry Moss. Both ended up being involved in the receiving game, having 3. And hat tip, because I do agree with this at the end of the day, to Debro. Debro was calling for Eric All season. It didn't happen, but Eric All did have the highest snaps of tight ends. So just put it on hold. Eric All breakout season is probably coming here in the very near future.
Okay. All right. So with Mark Andrews, would you maybe even attempt as a manager to sell him high here, Welsh? I know it's not you're not getting full value, the 4th, 5th round pick you maybe used on him earlier this season, but like Charlie Kolar in this game as well, he's kind of been the run blocking tight end of this group. He went 3 for 64 on 4 targets as well. So like it feels like a very, very messy position group as a whole in Baltimore there.
If you were selling me a ham sandwich, I would give you Mark Andrews. Yeah. If you can sell Mark, I don't even think that's in my mind. If you could sell Mark Andrews, you do it. But I don't think a lot of people are selling. I think what a lot of people are doing is they're staring at the waiver wire, being like, oh, should I pick it? No, I don't think you should pick him back up unless you have nothing, unless it's a tight end premium or it's a big 16-team league or something like that. I just still don't have interest. I think it's kind of fool's goldy, but absolutely, to your point, there's plenty of just like basic leagues out there where people are like, oh my God, it finally happened. Mark Andrews. Yes. Sell if you can for sure.
Okay. How do you feel about T. Higgins after this week as well? I feel like kind of a bounce back week for him after a really slow start to the season, was banged up with that hammy coming into the year. 2 touchdowns for him. One of the best days we've seen from T. Higgins. And honestly, what feels like 1 or 2 years at this point.
Yeah, no, it was huge. It's funny enough. I think Yoshivas actually outsnapped T. Higgins, but
really?
Higgins had 14 targets in this game to Yoshivas just 2 targets. So wow. T. Higgins, huge. Also, hat tip to the MLB player that hit me up in the Instagram earlier this week, and I told him to trade for T. Higgins in a trade. So hat tip to him for getting that trade done and starting that up. But yeah, this is a big one. Also, probably a little bit of a sell opportunity for Higgins to have that. Though I will say this, though. This team's got to throw the ball. They've got to 39.
Yeah.
If you would have told me Burrow had 30 completions, I'd have said, oh, it's probably 50 pass attempts. That efficiency of 30 for 39 is unreal. But this is how they have to win games. So that does speak well for T. Higgins moving forward, because this run game just still doesn't work. Chase Brown out carried Zach Moss in this game. But the 14 targets, if someone's like through the moon, I'd potentially look at trading him for sure.
Should have paid Jesse Bates, man. That defense might have been a little bit better here, I think, in 2024 if they would have. Meanwhile, in the Windy City, the Bears continue to beat down on teams they are supposed to. They defeat the Carolina Panthers here 36-10. Chicago controlled the time possession in this, nearly 34 minutes on the offensive attack, ran 69 plays for 424 yards. Nice. Big day for Chicago's big 3 here as well. DJ Moore, 2 touchdowns for him, 27.5 fantasy points. Caleb Williams, serviceable day for him as well. 2 touchdowns, 304 passing yards. And DeAndre Swift, he's back apparently once again. He had a big week, number 4. He follows it up here in week 5 with 21 for 73 and 1 on the ground, 2 for 47 in the air. Decent game for Cole Kmet as well for Chicago, 3 for 57. Decent by tight end standards there. But can you trust anyone else on this Bears offense, whether that's Rome Odunze or Keenan Allen, who has proven to be one of the worst fantasy picks through 5 weeks here, Welsh?
Yeah, and it's pretty surprising, too, because there seemed to be a really great connection early on in camp. I mean, I will say that Odunze and Allen both had 6 targets, a lot less efficiency for Allen. And unfortunately, he's just not a deep play guy. I think he's going to be one of those just like, oh, he has a 2 touchdown week type of player. Yeah. I really don't think I think Keenan Allen has moved off of being a real trustworthy option. Like, he was an wide receiver 3 at this point. Like, how much safer is he than Damari Douglas? Pop Douglas. It's really not. Damari Douglas is probably better at this point, even though it's an awful offense. So, who can you trust? You can trust DJ Moore. Revenge game, absolutely through the roof. The 2 scores, you love to see it. Hate to say it, but, you can trust DeAndre Swift at this point. 21 carries. He was efficient in the pass game, but they did give Roschon those 10, and he did get some of the red zone stuff of getting those 2 touchdowns. So I I will say that I think Erickson had him as a sell last week. I'm going to agree on this. If someone is really buying high on Swift, I'm good with it. But when I say, can you trust him? Like, I think you could trust him as like a low end RB2. But if someone really thinks, oh my God, it's happening, I would sell off because they are still running another guy there. But Cole Kmet's a solid like back end tight end too. So I think the real truthful ones are Kmet and DJ Moore. I think Swift is a little bit of a mirage. And I'll tell you what, though, I think Caleb is really starting to progress as a quarterback. He still makes a couple dumb plays. He had this wide open. He was staring DJ Moore down and he just didn't throw it. And he ended up getting sacked. But then like he has that amazing play to Kmet where Kmet kind of broke through this zone coverage and he hit him perfect for this first down. Like he is really developing into a great quarterback to the point where, you know, I know he's drafted high. He's looking more like a streamer day in and day out, and they're throwing the ball a whole bunch. So I think Caleb is starting to push himself into that deeper league, definite, much better QB2 in Superflex at this point.
Agreed. Meanwhile, for the Panthers, the only big fancy performer here was Chuba Hubbard, 17.5 fantasy points for him. He's averaging 19.8 fantasy points over the past month. So it's been great for Hubbard so far. We don't know how that's going to shake out when we get Jonathan Brooks back here from injury as well. We mentioned Deontay Johnson earlier this season or earlier this episode as well, 3 for 23 on 6 targets. Do you think we still got to keep rolling Deontay out there then? And like, can we stop calling Dave Canales an offensive genius? I just don't think he is, man. Like I get the quarterbacks he's had to deal with here in Carolina haven't been great, but even seeing what Tampa Bay is doing this season, like moving Chris Godwin back into the slot, like who knew that would have such a positive effect on the offense? Like, I don't know. I'm just kind of over Canales a little bit and kind of just over this whole Carolina offense aside from Hubbard, really.
Yeah, we can co-sign that for sure. But I'm still into Deontay. We said it earlier. I think this is kind of a buy opportunity. He did have 6 targets. It was just a wildly bad Andy Dalton day. You know, he was sacked 3 times. He only had 28 pass attempts. They ended up bringing in Bryce Young because this game got away. But they actually had a couple rushes for Deontay Johnson. So they were trying to get 8 touches into this game with those 6 targets. He's just the offense. So I'm rolling him out. I'm buying Chuba Hubbard. There's a little part of me that feels sellish on Chuba Hubbard. You know, the big play, the 38-yard play carried this, but he still would have had, you know, what with the math, 12 for 50 or something like that. Like he's still efficient. And even when Brooks comes back, he's going to be efficient and he'll be a piece of the, but I'm just worried it's going to be Brooks and Chuba and Chuba's going to have those big plays. So if you can sell Chuba in the RB2 territory, I'm doing it. And Deontay, I just want to buy him really cheap right now. But yeah, there's no genius going on here.
Half of me wants to like pour one out for Miles Sanders, who goes there last year, takes the big contract, and it has seen really no work this season. But then like part of me is like, man, this guy's making like 25 million guaranteed over the next. Yeah, like he's chilling, man. He can move back here to the great state of Pennsylvania when it's all said and done.
We're going out to dinner. Miles is buying, so he's doing all right there, Seth.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And before we jump into the next game here, I do want to remind you that if you want a chance to win a signed Justin Jefferson helmet for free, courtesy of our friends over at pristineauction.com, all you need to do is head over to fantasypros.com/contest, complete the form, and either A, download the Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard app, B, leave a review for the podcast, or C, follow us on X, Instagram, or TikTok at Fantasy Pros. The more actions you complete, the more entries you will receive. And we'll be announcing a winner right here on the podcast. So if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed, make sure you're turning on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize if you do happen to be that lucky winner. All right. And in Houston here, after questionable play calls from the Bills with under a minute left, the Texans get a long field goal to win this game 23-20. And if it weren't for 2 turnovers from the Texans, I don't think this game would have been necessarily all that close. Houston outgained the Bills by 149 yards. They controlled the ball for over 33 minutes here. Terrible game for Josh Allen, just 9 for 30, 131 yards, 1 touchdown. Kind of looked like Josh Allen's rookie year stat line there. Can this offense like really be trusted here, you think, moving forward, Welsh? Because it felt like they were missing Khalil Shakir a little bit. Keon Coleman, he caught one of his 5 targets for that long bomb and the score. But very disappointing for Dalton Kincaid as well. I mean, the 4th single-digit performance of the season for him, and he was one of my all-in picks this year. I loved Kincaid.
Yeah, I am. So can Allen get this fixed? Yeah, sure. But I do think if I had to pinpoint a team, a singular team and if I were to say this as a statement, what's the team that needs to make a trade to make their team better? I think a lot of people would be like, oh, the Chiefs, because they lost Rashee Rice.
Yeah.
I think it's the Bills. I think that this Bills offense, and they got this bevy of wide receivers, but Khalil Shakir out ruined them this week. I mean, 9 for 30, Allen was. And then there's a big talk on the back end here, Fantasy Pros. Hey, Curtis Samuel gets put into it. I total L for me on Curtis Samuel. I thought Curtis Samuel could be like the one on this team this year because of how he can be used in some of those easy, short, middle yard dump off type of plays. He ends up playing that Khalil Shakir role this week. It's garbage. He had 1 catch for 0 yards and 4 targets. They can't get Keon Coleman. I don't know if it's a separation issue, something we need to look into. I need to look into for separation rate. He had 5 targets, catches 1 big play every single week. They have Hollins out there. I think they could really use somebody to open up this, because Dalton Kincaid, you're not getting separation from him. These wide receivers aren't finding it. And I think that's keeping Allen from really slinging the ball and maybe the overall efficiency in general. And we're not just seeing him take it down and, run for 80 yards. So a long answer to say, like, this could be something if people are really freaked out about Allen. Yeah, sure. I love buying opportunities on elite players. Can they fix it? They can, but I think they need to be more proactive about it, because I don't know if this current talent can do it, because they don't seem to be using Keon Coleman seems to be a massively talented player. That it's, how do you only get him 5 targets every single week?
Because they're running Matt Collins out there
and Mark and MVS.
Yeah.
How do you end up doing?
Yeah.
Maybe he's not capable of doing it in his rookie year. So make a change. There's been Devontae Adams, I believe, rumors with them as well. If they make a move, I think it's a big plus for Josh Allen, but his arrow is trending down right now because they're very stagnant.
Yeah, it feels like right now you're starting Allen, you're starting Cook, you're starting Shakir probably in your flex if he's active down the line. And if you have to throw Dalton Kincaid back out there just because of the tight end landscape, you're plugging your nose and you're kind of doing it. But as you mentioned, Josh Allen, only 14.6 fantasy points this week, 7.3 fantasy points last week. The upcoming schedule isn't the best, but considering he's always going to give you a pretty decent floor with his legs, has that high upside as well, I think he's actually a strong buy low candidate right now. And you can actually right now go to fantasypros.com/myplaybook to use our trade analyzer, or you can actually visit the Fantasy Football My Playbook app and instantly evaluate how any trade will affect your team this week, for the rest of the season, or in Dynasty as well. So just a quick plug there. I love using that tool. It's helped me a lot this season and in previous seasons as well. And hey, I love me a little Josh Allen here, buying low moving forward. Sticking in this game as well, CJ Stroud, another good game from him from a real life perspective, 331 passing yards, but the scoring rate is way down for him. The touchdowns are way down, kind of seeing that regression we were worried about with him not being a rushing quarterback. Has only scored over 16 fantasy points twice in 5 games this season. Are you worried about him or the outlook for any of these Texans wide receivers? As you mentioned, another good day for Diggs. Collins looked great before he pulled that hammy, but Dell has actually now failed to score over 11.2 PPR points in any game this season.
Am I worried? No. Long term, I'm not worried. Short term, you don't love to see it, but it's tough when you're looking at a guy that threw over 330 yards, and we're like, how worried are we? I don't want every single thing for us to talk about, and this is me doing this, to be like, hey, I'm buying on these guys. But when you do talk about it, and people are like, man, CJ Stroud really isn't living up to it. Like, that's going to fix. That's going to change because he has 3 massively talented wide receivers. Of the 3 wide receiver core. Forgive me if someone's going to say, oh, this one right here, but it's the best 3 wide receivers in the league. I mean, the 49ers are not too shabby with Debo, Ayuk, and Jennings right now, but it's the best three wide receivers in the league. You got a decent tight end when he's not throwing footballs at people and getting stupid penalties, but they're also missing, I think, a really key thing in Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon out was such a cog in that rushing game to help establish those big plays in the passing game and the play action. No defense is scared of Cam Akers right now. And guess what? They haven't made any defense scared of him because they're not using him a bunch. So when they get Mixon back, I think it's going to make the offense more efficient. Hopefully you're going to have Nico back in. And I think Tank is going to get rolling here very, very shortly. Great connection with Stroud and him. I'm a buy. I'm not really super worried about it. Get your Texans.
Okay, I like that. I was actually trying to buy Stephon ahead of this game a little bit because revenge game going in. I was like, oh, maybe Stephon can do something here. I had the anytime TD on him as well. Didn't hit that here 2 weeks in a row, but still a good game for him nonetheless. Meanwhile, let's move to the nation's capital, where I have to admit, Welsh, I definitely underestimated this Commanders team this season and how quickly they would rebuild this and flip the script here. I was looking at prices of Steelers and Commanders tickets earlier this year, and I was like, no way am I going to pay that much to go see the Steelers beat up on a team that is really bad. Well, they're absolute wagons right now, folks. They are, they're 4-1, and they just beat the tar out of the Cleveland Browns 34-13 here. Pretty modest day overall for the Washington Commanders starters here. They did sit a majority of that fourth quarter. Still, Jaden Daniels, 19.7 fantasy points. B-Rob didn't get his full workload. I don't know how healthy he was coming into this one, but still found the end zone twice. Terry McLaurin went for 4 for 112 as well, but just not as straightforward from the Browns, not as good looking. Highest point scorer for them was actually Jordan Akins in this one, 11.2 fantasy points for him. Watson hasn't looked great, but I don't think it's fair to fully blame him, Welsh. I really don't. This line is awful. The wide receivers are dropping balls as well. Watson took 7 sacks in this one. So do you think when Nick Chubb comes back that maybe he can help turn things around for this offense that only put up 212 total yards here, was 1 for 13 on third down, or is it Joe over here in Cleveland?
Yeah, I think it can help Jameis Winston. It's not going to help. Deshaun Watson is trash, and he's not a good person. He's not a good quarterback. We're done. We're done with Deshaun Watson. We don't even have to be nice about it. You're being very nice about it. We don't need to be super nice with Deshaun Watson. 15 of 28, sacked 7 times. The offensive line looks bad. He makes bad decisions. You were going up against a secondary that had given up 10 touchdowns to wide receivers. Amari Cooper ended up having 10 targets, 4 catches. Jordan Akins at the back end of the game ended up getting something. You didn't have another wide receiver over 16 yards in this game. So all of that aside, even if you don't care about any of the stuff with like we get mixed up with the Deshaun Watson stuff. I don't know, whatever. But he's not good, and he doesn't make this team good. Nick Chubb can help establish a play action game for Jameis Winston, who I think undoubtedly at this point would just be a better option to experiment, to see with what you have in this team, because they do have some playmakers. I will also say this, interesting just to throw in to the Chubb side, that you had Ford go 9 for 47 and Foreman 9 for 44. I do think this team is like setting us up to show what we're going to end up seeing when Chubb is back. And I think it's going to be a full split. And so I would say this, if you believe, or someone in your league believes, that Chubb is going to come back and get 22 carries and be the dominant, top 10 RB in fantasy, I just don't. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. So if there's an opportunity in this excitement as he's closing in and coming back to sell, I think so, because I think he's going to be limited. But this offense just stinks, and they've really given us no sign outside of, like, you had to let I think Terry Bradshaw was talking about it, that he needs to not be out there. Watson needs to not be out there. They have not made that commitment at this point. And as soon as they do, I think you're going to almost get one of those weird Flacco situations where it's like, wow, you're really moving this offense, and this is starting to look good. Not that Winston's like that much better, but all of this to say is Chubb will make the running game a little bit more efficient, but I will hurt Ford. I don't think it makes Chubb valuable enough. And until Deshaun Watson is not the quarterback, I'm really disinterested. Yeah, I guess Amari Cooper is still the number one. He had 10 targets. That's really great. Depth of target, it's there. He is a wide receiver 3 at best right now, until they get something to change this offense where he has the upside of being like a wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I remember. I can't remember if it was you or Erickson or Joe on the Betting Pros podcast this past week, but I remember one of you guys pushed all the chips in on Amari Cooper anytime touchdown. I followed you. I tailed you at that one, and he was right there. He was 2 yards away from it. I was just praying he could get there, and then. Yeah, so it was a tough bad beat there, because I pushed 2 units in on that. I was feeling really good on it. So good call nonetheless. I think, and the opportunity was there, as you said. This Commanders defense, their secondary specifically, has been absolutely terrible, garbage this season, and they just couldn't take advantage. So I don't blame you for calling for the job of Deshaun Watson there. Greg Olsen, in this entire second half of the game, he probably alluded to it about 5 times. Hey, I don't care how much you're getting paid. I don't care, what it costs to bring you here. Performance matters on the field. And
I think to them, it's like you have to admit you're wrong, but like we all know you're wrong. Like everybody in the world is looking, and we will all support Watson going away, but there's something about that they won't do it. He's just not making this team better. So, it's a weird situation, but until he's not the quarterback, I'm not going to jump headfirst into Njoku. I'm not going to jump headfirst into Amari Cooper or speculate anywhere else. If anything, it really is trend. I should have phrased it a little bit better with the Chubb thing, because funny enough, everything is trending down for this team until noted otherwise.
Yeah. Meanwhile, in Duval County, the Jaguars continued their streak of beating the Colts at home, winning 34-37 in this one. Pretty even game, pretty back and forth game as well. Over 700 yards of combined offense in this one. Trevor Lawrence heard the critics this past week. People were talking a lot on the internet after he missed some easy completions last week for big gains, and he answered the critics this week. 28 for 34, 371 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception for the quarterback there. And then Brian Thomas Jr. continues to lead the way for this receiving game as well. 5 for 122 and 1 on 5 targets. Meanwhile, 3 straight games for Christian Kirk with over 12 PPR points as well. Where do you rank these Jaguars position players rest of season? Is Brian Thomas now like a borderline high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1, and is Kirk just kind of in that flex mix, you think?
Yeah, so this is fun. This is way more fun than what we were talking about before. It should have been super quick. It's like Brown stink. Let's move on. This is fun because there's so much breakout in the Jags. This was the start, that official breakout Brian Thomas game, and hat tip to really, I mean, all the pros guys. Debro's been on it all year. Erickson was calling it this week. We did that on the prop show, and he has been a huge big play guy this year. But now it's almost like Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman gets 1 catch for 40 yards and a touchdown every game. That was like Thomas, 1 catch for 50. And it's almost like if you give them 8 or 9 targets, they can make really good plays, especially if you have someone getting the ball. So to answer your question, I think Brian Thomas really can sit into that comfortable wide receiver 2-ish territory. I think Kirk is somewhere between a 2 and 3, especially in full PPR. But I don't know if I'm going to, beat down the doors. He had 88 yards, but he only had 4 targets. So you saw massive targets going to Brian Thomas, and we still had Ingram out. So when Ingram comes back, what's that going to change? Yeah. The bigger offensive change was, as we talked about at the top, was Etienne. Etienne ended up playing a big role in the receiving games. He out-targeted Christian Kirk by 3 targets. He had 7 targets in the receiving game, but then he was out-touched by Tank Bigsby. So I really do feel that there's a legit shot that this team might start mirroring the Bucs. Think about that. It's like Brian Thomas kind of mirrors a little bit more of the Mike Evans role of the big play type of stuff, even though I know Godwin does it. Kirk is more of that Godwin role, except Godwin just, he's him. Yeah. And then, Irving is Bucky and Travis Etienne is Rachaad White. Kind of put that in your brain. That's how I would approach it. If people are asking in the chat, hey, I was a buy on Bigsby, but is he the one? No, they're probably still going to roll out Etienne. This is going to be messy, but if you can wrap your head around that both of these guys are probably flex-ish to RB2s, depending on bye weeks, I'm cool with Bigsby. I'm cool with Etienne there. There are legit 6 starters, I guess, on this team on a given week. And Trevor Lawrence is at least proving to he's back in the circle of trust that we can put him in there. He's not every single week, you don't even think about it, but you're back in the circle of trust where we can talk to you.
And if you haven't already, go drop Gabe Davis, please. He should not be rostered.
He outsnapped all the wide receivers, by the way. He is, if anyone plays basketball or fantasy basketball ever in the last 10 years, he's like Tony Snell. Tony Snell would play 38 minutes a game, 40 minutes a game, and he would have 1 shot attempt, 1 rebound, 1 steal, and that's it. Gabe Davis outsnapped both Thomas and Kirk and did nothing. He is weird, dude.
Cardio king, man. Cardio king. It's how he's always kind of been. Shout out Gabe Davis. Remember the good times, my friend. Meanwhile, for the Colts, the Joe Flacco experience is very, very real. 33 attempts for him in this one, or 33 completions, on 44 attempts. 359 yards for Flacco, 3 touchdowns. Trey Sermon, pretty serviceable without Jonathan Taylor. Love the 6 receptions for 25 through the air, 10 for 38 on the ground with a score. So he got it done, gave you good replacement level value there. Pittman found the end zone again, as did Alec Pierce. But Josh Downs, to me, is the story here, Welsh, in this Colts receiving game. 12 targets, 9 for 69. How do you rank these Colts wide receivers rest of season? And does that change when Anthony Richardson comes back as well? Because it feels like Downs has always been a lot better when Flacco's been under center.
Well, no, Richardson also likes Downs, but I think Flacco to Richardson is a Pittman thing. Downs, to me, I don't want to call him quarterback proof, but I kind of don't think it matters which quarterback is out there. Flacco wanting to, Flacco's the efficiency, he's not moving around the pocket. He's making quicker decisions. Boom, downs down the middle. He's your slot receiver. Anthony Richardson, first read, feel comfortable throwing it, run around a little bit. And then what do? Go to your safety net down the middle. Yeah. So I think Downs is the quarterback-ish proof wide receiver of this group. But the problem is like Pittman's upside is so high. So I think, and this is the weird thing, I think Downs and Pittman have gone, from like the gap, if you're watching on the YouTube side, which you should, youtube.com/FantasyPros, it was here to start the season. And so now it's come down to here. Like, I think they're relatively even.
Yeah.
Pittman, probably a mid wide receiver 2 to 3, but I think Downs is as well, especially in full point PPR. Pierce is fun, but it's all big plays. It's like, he's going to be like the ADOT leader on the year. Pierce isn't really a big option unless I'm in desperate bye-week need, but Downs and Pittman are starters moving forward. And I think we could have been encouraged by what Richardson did before he got hurt in the last game to maybe kind of get them going. But I'm a Josh Downs guy.
Would you sell Michael Pittman Jr. high after this week, you think?
I don't think he did enough to really go super high.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm interested in it. Like, Pittman to me is, but like someone they're disagreeing with me that Downs, like Downs is the safety net guy. Like a quarterback proof is not a good thing that I'm saying because it makes it sound like he's going to just eat every single week. But like Downs is the safety net guy that does just get targets. Pittman is most affected by this. So back to your answer, if someone is like, oh, Michael Pittman is back. Yeah, I probably would, because when Richardson takes back over, I think it most affects him.
Okay. In Foxborough, it was a great game to bet the under. I was riding that, so I was a happy camper in this one. Miami, they win 15-10. Tyreek Hill, 6 for 69. Jalen Waddle, also somewhat better, 4 for 46. But the story for fantasy were the backfields here. Achane left. We talked about this Miami backfield. Wright might be a good speculative ad. Talented rookie out of Tennessee there. He goes 13 for 86. Raheem Mostert resumes some of that heavy workload, 19 for 80 for him. Meanwhile, for the Patriots, Ramondre Stevenson, 12 for 89 and 1, also saw 4 receptions as well after being benched. Gibson, meanwhile, I threw him in my lineup in a couple of leagues where I just had to have a spot start at the RB2 position. Didn't really come through for us, but did have 6 carries, 452 yards, and 1 reception as well. How do you rank these 4 running backs in this game rest of season, assuming Achane misses at least one game with the concussion?
Well, rest of season, it's so we're going what? Stevenson, Gibson, Mostert, and Achane?
Yes.
It's still Achane. And then there's a tier break, and then it goes to Stevenson. And then I would the challenge is Mostert versus Gibson. I think they're relatively close.
Okay.
This might be really stupid. I think I might lead Gibson a tiny bit over Mostert, but as Mostert gets healthy, one of the best things about him, he did this back when he was a 49er, is like you would have a drive going on, 8th play through the drive, and then you would get this dude who's got one of the highest sprint speeds in football, and then he just burning defenses. That's what can make him efficient. He scored all those touchdowns. Now I want to reverse it. I actually want to put Mostert over Gibson. I'm just not as big of a Gibson guy. I think his role is there. They kind of juked us with the like, hey, Stevenson is going to be benched, and we saw more snaps on Gibson, but he was still out carried by Stevenson. He's still the better runner. I don't think you're ever going to see Gibson in some big major roles. So Gibson is the lowest of all of them, but he actually might have like a decent floor.
Higher than Wright, though. Higher than Wright still. You still like him?
Probably? At this point, if Achane and Mostert are both healthy, then yes, Wright is just really not an option. Like Wright only got in because Achane was left out. Now, if Achane missed time, I think Wright's upside is better than a guy like Gibson.
Any other fantasy takeaways from this game for you? It still feels like it's just kind of, hey, we got to keep throwing out these Miami wide receivers, even though the upside might not be there until Tua Tagovailoa does return from that concussion.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one is I'm just Erickson and I, we have been team by Dolphins. It didn't really sound super smart 2 weeks ago, unfortunately. Yeah. It's still not a win. It's not like we get to brag about it, but Tyreek Hill looked better. Huntley looked a little bit better. There was still some bad stuff, but my whole point going out of last week, even though Tyreek Hill kind of stunk, was, hey, they're doing stuff that you want. You're seeing screen passes. They are trying to throw deep. You're getting Tyreek in open field stuff. And then this week, it was just more efficient, some better throws. They got to Tyreek a little bit deeper. I think that was a plus. So I've been very buy Tyreek. If people look at this like, oh, should I sell him now? Nah, I'm still a buy Tyreek if people are trying to get out from this, because if we do get Tua back, then we're back in big business.
I think a fun drinking game is like watch these Miami games without Tua, and every time Mike McDaniel makes some weird face on the sideline, you drink, because it feels like every time something goes wrong, they cut to him, Welsh, and he's just making the most absurd. I'm not mad. I'm disappointed, or like I just don't even know what to do anymore.
Well, we promote drinking responsibly, and that would not be a responsible game to play.
Yes.
If you know what I mean.
Yes, absolutely. Make sure you have a designated driver if you are driving that night, for sure, if you're playing that game. Let's move to the Rocky Mountain State here, where the Denver Broncos win 34-18 over the Raiders. I mean, just a tough scene out there for the Raiders in general. Like, it started off good. Brock Bowers had that long touchdown. We thought, okay, maybe we're in business here. Just not the case. Just not the case. Gardner Minshew, he splits time with Aiden O'Connell in this one as well. Bo Nix looked a little bit better. 200 passing yards for him. That was great to see, but it didn't really translate for fantasy production. Cortland Sutton had a down game. Javonte Williams actually had one of his best games of the season, 16 fantasy points for him. So any big takeaways, any winners, any losers here for you?
You know, I mean, the Raiders are going to kind of make you look good. They're very dysfunctional right now. I thought Madison was going to be more efficient. He did get 15 carries, but it was not good. It was like a little over 2 yards per carry. Abdullah ended up out rushing him. I thought we might see more Trey Tucker, but Jacoby Myers got his roll on. Brock Bowers continues to look good, but I think the Raiders are a really big mess. And, you know, with this Adams situation, it's just Bowers right now, which is really the only trustworthy thing. The Broncos, it's definitely nice to see Bo Nix going like this. Like Troy Franklin had a touchdown that he had just dropped. Like, Bo Nix could be a guy that maybe is like a super flex option. But again, I look at this like Cortland Sutton again, like Bo Nix, even in 27, he was 19 of 27. If I told you 19 of 27, what do you think Sutton did? You might get excited. Well, don't, because he had 2 catches in this one. So we are in a space where I don't think I can comfortably say there is a Bronco that I would start, and I would no doubt start. Even Sutton at this point, even though Sutton has been an air yard king, you know, and everyone, you look at him and you look at it, oh my gosh, he should start having some efficiency. Bo Nix is still not really getting there. So I'm not sure there's a Bronco that is really positive, even though you saw a good Javonte Williams week. I don't trust it. I do not trust it at all. 13 carries. No, sir. Not today. Not going to trust any of them.
Can we drop Jaleel McLaughlin? I know from a lot of us at Fantasy Pros this offseason, we kind of were hyping him up, but 6 for 22 here this week, had 3 receptions, but I feel like you don't really love rolling out Javonte. So what's the point in rostering Jaleel at this point other than a handcuff?
100%. Yeah, no, I was a total Jaleel McLaughlin guy too. I mean, you know, I was D-Bros like one of his top sleepers, and we all were kind of there. And what's so funny about it, the logic made sense. You know why we were all there? Because we're like, hey, Javonte's not going to take this over. There's opportunity. And there was opportunity because Javonte has not been great. But neither is Jaleel. Neither is the offensive line. And neither anybody there. So, you can absolutely. This is bye week time. That whole we're sitting and we're hanging on guys for a little bit. Peace out. We don't need to be holding on to Jaleel McLaughlin.
Good point. All right. And Welsh, I don't want to bring it up, but I have to, man. Your 49ers, they do fall 23-24 to the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray came out dashing and gashing this defense here with his legs early on. 82 rushing yards for him and the touchdown. He had a pretty serviceable fantasy day. And hey, Brandon Ayuk's back, 8 for 147. Great to see that. Quiet game, though, from Deebo Samuel. Jordan Mason didn't quite live up to projections here either. Didn't find the end zone for one of the first times this season. And like, it's tough, man, because like, I feel like it's just like arrogant mistakes that are plaguing this 49ers team, both from a real life football perspective, Welsh, and fantasy as well. Like they just can't get there. I thought Ayuk was going to take one of those last final receptions to the house, and he just couldn't break the corner there and get there. So what are your takeaways from this 49ers defeat here at the hands of their division rival, the Arizona Cardinals?
Yeah, I mean, Mason's situation was because he had a critical fumble, like an absolutely critical fumble inside the 20, which gave the Rams the ball back, and then they went and kicked the field goal and won the game. So that was brutal and disgusting, and that could have been a situation where the 49ers, it could have been a difference. I'll also point out, as gross as it is, Moody got hurt, their kicker. They couldn't kick field goals. They had to go for it on 4th and 23, and they tried to do a punt situation, which then Kittle dropped the ball, and they didn't move the ball. So they were in it. They had to score at all times, and Mason really screwed them. I think the Ayuk situation is really interesting. on the trade show, I said you could make a case to buy or sell Ayuk. I was choosing on the sell, but I also said that don't be surprised if this week things kind of pop off. And Erickson kind of agreed with that and then took it as one of his biggest, like, Ayuk is going to go crazy this week. Debo, for whatever reason, actually struggles against the Cardinals, like, over his career. I don't know what it's about. And he did in this game as well. And it didn't look good. Juwan Jennings, they couldn't get the ball to. It was Kittle and it was Ayuk. I don't know. Like I told you before, I still kind of stand on the long term. Maybe I do want to sell Ayuk because I think they're going to bounce between weapons. Jennings has taken some of that deep role. It just didn't happen in this game. They purposefully were getting Ayuk in and he was awesome. But I think this is, to me, this is the opportunity to take this really big performance, see if you can sell it on the high, because they're going to continuously bounce back between these guys. So, from that 49ers standpoint, Brock Purdy made a couple stupid decisions and they just were not efficient. Even though they blocked the field goal, returned it for a touchdown, they had some things going their way. They didn't. And the Cardinals just stuck in the game. The Niners could not stop the run. That's a sneaky play, by the way. You see the Niners defense, you're like, oh, I can't start players. Yes, you can, because you can run on the 49ers. And Connor, 19 for 86. Kyler Murray busted a 50-yard touchdown to kick off the game. But they shut down Marvin Harrison, and it went to the second wide receiver. Kyler did an okay job at that. McBride's still fine, even though he was banged up. Harrison's still fine. This is just a quiet one for him. Michael Wilson's a little bit of fool's gold. But, I think it's actually pretty status quo, except Ayuk had the game, and it's your decision now. Oh, awesome, let's hold in, or trade him now, because I personally think, like, next week, we're going to probably get back to Jennings. We're going to get Jennings, or Debo specifically is going to get heavily involved next week because he got shut out.
How much are you willing to trade for Marvin Harrison Jr. right now? I'm going out in all my leagues right now and trying to send out some offers.
Sure.
Green Bay up on the docket next weekend for him.
Yeah, I mean, there's part of me, I'm wondering, like, would I trade Ayuk to get Marvin Harrison? But I don't think those trades usually equate like wide receiver for wide receiver. But yeah, no, 100%. Like, I would go back. This is like week one. Marvin Harrison stunk. We're like, hey, bye. And then he has the big one. He is a little bit weird, though, because he's still, I think I got to go look, but I want to say it's like under 50% on the catch rate. 7 targets. He only caught 2. Like, he's a very big play type of guy. He's not volume like Malik Neighbors. So
it's kind of what we thought he was going to be, is a little bit of volume too,
That's what I thought he would be, more volume. So I'm not sure I'm like, selling the house or anything like that. But yeah, people are going to be frustrated. It's always a great time. Big, massive, talented players you can buy low off of really big frustration. 100%, but I would pay attention, because, like, if Marvin were catching 9 balls a game or 7 balls a game like Malik was, I might feel way different about this, but he's not. Who catches this game?
All right, a couple games left for us here. Let's go out to Los Angeles, where the Packers come into town and they win 24-19 against the Rams. Pretty good day overall for the Packers offense. Josh Jacobs, he found the end zone here. His best fantasy day of the season. 19 for 73 on the ground. Added that score as well. Also had a catch for 21 yards. But the big headline for the Packers here, it feels like Tucker Kraft has finally emerged as the guy that we thought, coming out of college, smaller school guy, that he could be. 4 for 88 and 2 touchdowns here. It looks like he has definitely won that role over Luke Musgrave, who did not get even on the box score this week. So how much are you digging what Tucker Kraft did here for the Packers? Also nice days for Jaden Reed and everyone's favorite waiver wire ad of the week, Devontae Wicks. Pretty disappointing for him.
Yeah, Wicks is a huge disappointment. I think they're going to see a lot of cuts off of him. Weird Dobbs situation, too. People didn't realize Dobbs didn't show up to practice because he wasn't like his role. That's a really odd one. So we'll have to kind of watch that. I think Wicks might hit the wire. Probably, I think I probably wouldn't do that. I think it's a little too premature. But Kraft, I have a lot of shares of Kraft, and this was the excitement. He was getting a whole lot of usage when Musgrave was out, but it was just a question of, like, would they split this between the tight ends or not? And they didn't. And Kraft had a huge big play. Awesome. I have to go and look. What was it, like 66 yarder breaking tackles, and then he had another short yardage one, which you'd love to see for Love. So yeah, I think Kraft is probably safely a top 8 tight end moving forward, because he's going to continue getting the distribution of targets. But Wicks was a big disappointment. I got to take the L. I was kind of selling a little bit on Josh Jacobs, and he just, because Wilson was looking good, but Jacobs was efficient, had a touchdown, 19 carries. He is still the big role for them. But big ups on Kraft. Jaden Reed's still good. Wicks is down, but I wouldn't go make some, crazy, super ridiculous cut right now.
For the Rams too, overall, like it's kind of what we expect from him. Honestly, Kyron Williams dominates the carries once again, 22 for 102 and 1. And Jordan Whittington, we talked about him on the IBT podcast earlier this last week, that he was one of my favorite plays, not only in fantasy football, but in prop markets as well. He goes for 7 for 89 on 10 targets. Tutu Atwell also saw 10 targets in this one, 6 for 58. And then Colby Parkinson, the tight end position might be back here, Welsh. He had 752 on 13 targets. So still kind of a mess for this Rams pass catching group as a whole. We know it's going to be a couple more weeks for Cooper Kupp and potentially at least 3 more weeks until we see Puka Nacua. So is there any Rams pass catching option that is worth rostering in the interim or long term, you think, as well? Because I really liked what we've seen out of Whittington this season.
Yeah, no, Whittington had like a high snap share even last week when the production wasn't there. 10 targets this week, 7 for 89. I think there is some long-term for him.
Okay.
I don't know what it's going to really look like when you get the main receivers back.
Mm-hmm.
Tutu Atwell is super fun right now. I think he is going to kind of poof once you get those other guys. Parkinson is also, I just want to point out, this is why I'm not adamant about going and picking up a guy like Mark Andrews. When a guy like Colby Parkinson is sitting out there, 13 targets, 7 for 53. These are products of not having Kupp and Nacua, so things can change. But like if I were ranking it, I mean, maybe Parkinson from like a top 12 tight end standpoint is really interesting, but I think him and Whittington are like the tippy top. If I'm looking for a couple weeks still, I think Tutu is a guy they're going to continue throwing the ball to.
Okay. All right. And let's go ahead and round out the program here with our final game of the earlier afternoon slate. 29-20. The New York Giants go into Seattle, go into the 12th man, and get away with a victory here. I rolled with Seattle in my Survivor League, so I am out for the year. So I don't appreciate the result of this game, Welsh. That was a tough one. But overall, like, I think, honestly, I'm just impressed with what the Giants continue to do this season. I know the record 2-3 is not great, but Daniel Jones continues to look like an NFL quarterback. Like, he looks like one of the 32 best. And I think all the memes, all the jokes aside, had a good game here as well. 257 yards, 2 touchdowns, was clean on the day. Darius Slayton, he was the guy that ended up going off here, 8 for 122 and 1. Wan'Dale Robinson, though, also serviceable once again. This guy's been one of the best waiver wire ads all season long, 6 for 36 and 1. And meanwhile, for Seattle, though, just, kind of going by, what I think we expect out of Seattle altogether, except Kenneth Walker, disappointing day for him, and Charbonnet. They couldn't really run the ball aside from a couple long Geno Smith fluke runs. DK Metcalf can't hang on to the ball. He keeps fumbling in really, really critical situations here. JSN finds the end zone. Tyler Lockett has a couple big plays. What are the big fantasy takeaways here from you? Because it feels like more of the same from kind of both these teams in a way, other than, some bright spots here for the Giants.
I mean, I think if you're looking for an actual takeaway, like Tyrone Tracy, this performance, Devin Singletary was getting kind of like the bell cow workload. This is the type of performance that could change that. Going 18 for 129, he averaged 7.2 yards per carry. And his longest was 27. So it wasn't like, he had an 80-yard or anything.
Right.
Like, that was an efficient running game that I would not be shocked to see him get more involved in the game. Everything else is just, I think it's kind of status quo. Like, Slayton jumped in. If everyone's like, ooh, is Slayton? No, he just jumped into the Malik role. And Wan'Dale kind of did what he usually does. 6 catches for 36. If he wants to get to 80 yards, he's probably going to need 14 catches. That was Wan'Dale. But Darius just took over that role. And then on the Seahawks side, horrible Ken Walker situation. But if you only run the ball 7 times with your backs, you're probably not going to have a lot of efficiency. And that's what they ended up doing. And then the wide receivers, they just kind of ended up spreading around. Lockett ended up getting the 33-yarder. Metcalf got the 7 targets, but Jackson Smith and Jigba, another 7 targets and a touchdown. So I think maybe JSN is moving into a little bit more of a trustworthy spot. And I think Tracy is going to be, I guess, probably maybe the top waiver wire guy if he wasn't already picked up when Singletary got knocked down. I think that's going to be at the tippy top. Obviously, if Bigsby's out there, people will be fighting for Bigsby and Tyrone Tracy, but those are going to probably be at the tippy top for waiver wire.
What do you think the split is for Singletary versus Tyrone Tracy, the talented rookie there for the Giants?
I wish I knew. I mean, I think it would be probably a 65-35.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry. So 60-40, 65-35.
Okay.
I thought I screwed up my math, but that was right. Like in that general vicinity. But if Singletary goes down, this is probably just a better matchup for him. But I think if I'm remembering it correctly, I want to say it's been like, 85% Devin Singletary at all times. So this is just going to open up opportunities. And if Tracy is still efficient, who knows? Maybe we see more of him. Like Devin Singletary is not really holding super talented players back. And maybe Tracy is unlocking that talent.
Okay, absolutely. Well, Welsh, I appreciate you joining us tonight, even though you weren't in the highest of spirits coming in. But I hope the Fantasy Pros family in the chat and myself were able to bring a little bit of feel good back to you here this evening. And that'll do it for us tonight on the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. Until next time, like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel and podcast feed. Join our Discord as well. Plus, download the My Playbook app. For Chris Welsh, I am Seth Woolcock. Thanks for watching. Take care, y'all.